I'm SP from Better Podcasting, a show dedicated to help make your podcast better. And it is part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other insightful and wonderful geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Welcome to episode 300 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we recount some fun Better Podcasting moments and take a look at some advice that just didn't hold up.
But first, in this week's Better Podnerings, topics include a SAG AFTRA statement on AI commercials and Podbean introduces AI.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we recap some of our wonderful audience Discord server comments.
Will they talk about our past 300? You'll have to wait and find out.
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
Yes, this is episode 300 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen, not Sparta, and I am pleased to say SP is here.
We're back after a couple weeks off. It's so good to be back in the studio, and it's especially awesome to be podcasting for our 300th episode on the Better Podcasting main show.
Oh, this is going to be a fun episode because if you have not listened to all past 299 plus episodes, you need to know that we're going to talk about some of these moments from the past. And so hopefully it will serve as a bit of a guide for you to walk down the path of past Better Podcasting episodes and listen to some younger Stephen and SP and maybe even laugh at us along the way. That's acceptable too.
Yeah, I'm still the old man SP, but I'm a little bit younger, older man SP. I'm like Yoda at 700 versus Yoda at 900.
and I'm just the crazy Canadian, the entire 300 episodes.
Yeah, you got a little bit, the tampering has gone down a little bit more tepid. I think that's due to all the Molson you've been consuming.
Could also be the drain from having kids now. That could be, I mean, what?
I resemble that comment.
And hey, we'll talk about this more in the future, but I wanted to throw this out here before we get into the meat of the show and mention I'm back on the Windows machine. I've pulled the trigger. Unfortunately, I am taking advantage of that Costco return, and I will be returning the Mac. There are some reasons why it just didn't work out for me, but we'll talk more in the future. And if anybody wants to talk in the meantime or throw some comments in there, come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, because I think that could actually enhance the future discussion that I will have about my journey with the Mac and why I ultimately chose not to stay that way for now, at least.
I look forward to hearing everybody's comments, and we will be talking about it in the future.
We here at Better Podcasting have made it very clear over the last 300 episodes that we're followers. And one of the ways that we're going to follow right now is in the terms of everybody talking about AI, because that is the hot topic right now. And so we got a couple of news points here we wanted to talk about in the abbreviated Better Podnerings this week. And the first is all about SAG AFTRA, because we've talked a little bit about SAG AFTRA in the past and how that might affect your podcast. And there's news now about SAG AFTRA and AI.
There was a message that went out about a new agreement, specifically a new audio commercials waiver that SAG AFTRA put together. And I'm going to summarize it a little bit here, even though we have the full text. Basically, they said in an email to all their members that they are pleased to share their new dynamic AI audio commercials waiver, which will open up new work opportunities for members, providing protective terms for the use of digital technology to create highly personalized audio-only digital ads. And this is the case of podcasts, basically, or radio, where you just have the audio and then you create an ad and then you personalize it to the person that it's being delivered to. So all sorts of privacy issues out there as well, but it is something that some companies are proceeding with. So they wanted to protect their members, their actors, their voice actors. So they put this waiver together. Now, the principal difference between this new dynamic AI audio commercials waiver and the previous dynamic audio waiver is the added terms that cover the use of AI technology to generate the personalized ads. The new waiver provides AI-specific contractual protections for members, requiring a performer's informed consent for the creation of their digital voice replica and additional consent for the use of their digital voice replica in any ad. Performers will also have the ability to opt out of the use of their digital voice replica in an ad. And each time a new commercial is created using their digital voice replica, a performer must be compensated per the terms of the waiver. The waiver also requires producers to take responsible steps to ensure the security of voice material and to prevent unauthorized use of the actor's voices by any third party, and to delete all copies of an actor's voice at the end of the employment relationship. Now, in looking at this waiver itself, I noted that a live session fee is actually set at $550 per session, which is 60 minutes. So in case you ever wanted to know how much a typical voice actor makes via the SAG AFTRA, if you're a member, it is $550 per hour. Now, if you go over, you get paid a little bit more. Also, the performer is paid per session or per commercial recorded, whichever is greater, and the session fee may not be applied towards use. You also get paid for the AI creation of the customization. So they take your voice, they make an AI version of the voice, and you get some money for that. And there are use fees for the commercial as long as it runs. Like a 4-week, you get $385 for that. A 6-month, you get $825. And a 1-year run, you get $1,210. So that was interesting to actually see some of those numbers in there. Again, this is not if you're an independent voice actor. This is if you are a member of SAG AFTRA, and this is the waiver that you use. So interesting stuff. I'm glad that they are putting in verbiage there to protect the actor's voice, to inform producers that they have to delete the recordings after the contractual relationship is over. I have my doubts on how secure that can be the higher level actor it is. Of course, if you're a known actor, like if you're James Earl Jones, you're not earning $550. You're earning more than that per commercial. But it is interesting to see this, and I'm liking the protection. I'm liking the actual application of AI. Like, you have recorded it and they create an AI version of your voice. So I'm glad to see all of this. It applies to commercials that run in podcasts, and it applies to radio audio as well. It doesn't say podcasts and radio, it just says audio. So I'm extrapolating that to podcasts and radio.
I'm glad to see this stuff starting to happen. I think that it also might start to encourage a framework of what people know that they are reasonable to expect if they're not part of SAG AFTRA. So it is something where if it's a project that's outside of SAG AFTRA, they know that if this becomes the norm, they should have some considerations, and their agreement should be somewhere in that realm for it to be fair to them. I do have concerns like you have about how this will actually work out in play and bad actors and all these other things. And also, I think the question is, depending on the level of voice work, how much we'll try to get just slid out there. Like, you know, you and I have the Better Podcasting theme, and we've had people randomly in stores hear it on an advertisement for, I don't remember what it was, makeup or something like that. And could it be something like that where people use voice work and, you know, they know, well, this is just going to be a small end use. And so we'll just try to slide it in there. And what's the odds that the person walking down the aisle will catch that advertisement and report it back to the right people, who will then pass it back to the original voice artist that will end up actually pursuing legal action? Like, I think I don't have a lot of faith in humanity. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and seeing some of the ransomware hacks that have been happening lately, I can see ransomware hacks ultimately hitting voice actors as well. So we'll see how that all plays out. Stephen, are you ready to move on to Podbean?
Yeah, because Podbean, if you didn't know this, is a podcast media host that we've talked about during our current season's arc of reviewing media hosts, which there's only a couple episodes left of that. We're taking a step back this week for the 300th episode. But I am excited to hear you talk about this just because they are still on our short list for potential future media hosts. And maybe this will sway you, SP.
Perhaps if you have a single podcast, because they don't have team accounts yet that I know of, or multiple accounts per, I think that's it. You can't have multiple shows on one account. You have to pay for each one. Anyway, Podbean is on our short list. It is something that we would recommend if you had one podcast. And they have taken the ball and run with it when Spotify stepped back and said they were going to remove all of the tools to actually create podcasts. So they basically came out, added AI, and made it a little bit better. They said this innovative new functionality allows users to record, edit, and AI optimize their podcast episodes directly on the Podbean app. Very similar to how Anchor.fm used to work, I guess. Creators can now leverage the mobile integration of Podbean AI to generate the episode's title and description for the podcasters. The AI technology also removes long silences, reduces background noise, and levels audio. Additionally, it boosts podcast discoverability by generating chapter markers and transcripts. And they have some YouTube videos as tutorials. There was also in their press release, a step-by-step tutorial that was mentioned. Then you could get the link below. I didn't see it on the Podbean blog website. I did not see a step-by-step tutorial link. So I don't know if it exists or not. I do know they have YouTube videos that are tutorials. So this is a step forward for Podbean. It helps capture some of the audience, I think, that is looking for that Anchor.fm sort of experience that might not want to use Riverside. And, in my opinion, I would not use Riverside either based on all the issues that I've seen with it. I have not used the Podbean functionality at all for the backend recording and editing and producing podcasts, but I know it exists. So if this is your thing, they made it better through AI. Now, I looked at some of the functionalities there, and I think the AI optimization is in the title and description. It is in the chapter markers. It's in the development of transcripts, which they're calling that AI. I don't know if that's AI or a large language model there. And it is in the cleanup of the audio. And I was thinking about this, Stephen. I'm going to ask you a question here before you get to comment. I'm sorry about it. But you think in terms of Alphonic, you think in terms of what you do to your audio. Do you trust any service, no matter if it's Podbean or Alphonic or whatever? Do you trust them to clean up your audio?
I have a minimal level of trust with this, and I'm not meaning that totally negatively. Why I say that is because I do think a lot of the editing processes that people follow, aside from the creative aspect, that every editor has a little creativity of their own, they're very similar. And so I don't think it's actually a stretch for AI to figure that out and apply something that actually sounds good on the other side. Now, what I have hesitation about is the idea of the creative aspects that I was mentioning. So like, I tell a dad joke, I specifically leave a little silence in or something like that because you're not responding. Those sort of things is where I wonder how well it will work. Or, the talking over each other, where sometimes there is a situation where you want to remove that. And I don't know that this technology is at that level of multi-tracks yet, but let's hypothetically say that we get there. There's times where it makes sense to have somebody actually cut off the other person because it adds to the conversation. What it will happen in those situations. So I think there's a lot of nuance that will probably, I think we'll see some shortcomings, but I do think that for some people, this potentially is a very valuable tool just because I think at the end of it, the basic form of editing is very replicable. Wow, I can't say that word, but I'll leave that in because we're talking about editing and I don't want to edit that out.
I was thinking in terms of all of the effects that I have put in and the things that I've learned on the different levels of the different effects to put in, what order to put the effects in and that sort of thing. I'm very particular about that. Could I be wrong on something? Could there be a better optimization? Probably. But I think I've come to a decent level of understanding with all the effects. And I really scratch my head of, is a service out there going to be better than me with all my experience and all my tools that I have? Now, I assume this is free if you're already using it. So, hey, if I was just starting out, I'd want to do something like this. I have used Auphonic back in the day to help with leveling and stuff like that, but I can't go there anymore. And I think this will help out somebody new. I wonder if there is some sort of off ramp for somebody that's new that comes into podcasting that uses this to optimize their audio. And is there a way for them to learn how to do it correctly that isn't incredibly painful? Because if you start using this, you're like, well, I just use that and that works out just fine for me. I don't need to make it better. And maybe they're right, but I don't think there's going to be an off ramp for people to learn how to edit the way that you and I learn how to formulate the audio is probably a better way to say it, because editing is like word choices and spaces, like you were saying. I think the audio quality is probably what I'm referring to.
See, I would say that for me, I have more faith in the audio quality just because we have seen things like the NVIDIA tools and whatnot, even a couple years ago, do some pretty amazing things. And so I do think we probably have to have some level of control of personal preference, because we've talked about that before. There are a lot of different ways that audio can be processed that is right. You listen to certain radio stations that have a certain format, generally pop. They're often over compressed and things like that, because that is that niche, that is that market. That's the expectation there. Then you listen to something else that it dials it back, and you talk radio sounds a certain way. And so if AI is just going to go in and be like, I think all audio should be the same, that might be a problem. And so I think you still need some level of, I want it to look like this. And from what I've seen with like synthetic voice control and whatnot out there, you get those options as it is for generating voices. So I think that could very well be a case. But we'll see what happens with this, how good it is. And also we will see what problems end up getting published because somebody didn't review their episode and AI destroyed it.
Yeah, and I will say, if you're doing a well-produced audio drama or a playthrough podcast with soundscaping, this is probably not the best thing to use their optimization.
Well, we'd love to know your thoughts. Come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com, or you can phone. No, 300 episodes later, still don't have a phone number. So come and email or come to our Discord, one of those two.
Who uses a phone anymore?
Shall we talk about our 300 episodes, SP?
Let's get to it. This is exciting.
This is the Better Podcasting Download.
That's right. We dug off the Better Podcasting Download this week because we're going to download you. I should be using the word upload, but go with it. We're going to download you some highlights and maybe lowlights from our past 300 episodes. So if you didn't know this, we were taking a break from the media host discussion for the 300th episode, because let's be honest, no media host out there deserves the honor of being our 300th episode feature. That's not going to happen. So we wanted to take a little bit of time for our 300th episode to dance around some of our past episodes. And really what it came down to is SP and I dove into the back catalog, dug out some favorites, and we just wanted to talk about some of these here. Don't worry, it's not a clip show. We're not doing a clip show, but we wanted to talk about our personal aspect of these points, some things that we enjoyed, and just have a bit of a conversation. And we'll reference some of these episode numbers. So if you do want to go back and listen to these specific episodes, you can do so. So get your pen and paper or your notepad out from your app, or I don't know, email yourself, whatever you're doing to take notes of these past episodes. And let's get into it.
Chisels and stones, my friend. Chisels and stones. Okay, the first notable fun moment we're going to talk about is one that I know somebody in our audience right now is going to appreciate, and that is episode 117. And you're just like, SP, you're going to give episode numbers this whole time? Well, we are, but this might spur your memory a little bit better. It is www.betterpodcasting.com. Yes, in February of 2018, we stepped away from the microphone for a week at the beginning of the show, and Jason Bryan from the Matt Talk Online, also notable announcer for the Olympic wrestling in the actual arena, also notable announcer for the St. Cloud Huskies in Minnesota, and Emily Prokop from ePodcast Productions, The Story Behind, and That's Hysterical Now, Get Out podcast, took over for the week. Now, we both quit at the beginning of the podcast, and it was over a fake topic argument that we had, and Jason and Emily came in and took over. And the fun part for us is they had both come in previously and substituted for one of us previously. And the fun part was that Jason and Emily chose that time to roast us, and we had no idea it was coming. We knew that they were going to talk about certain topics, but we didn't know that they were going to roast us. And we were actually sitting there the whole time, and we were messaging each other, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
Stephen, and we decided not to interrupt. We're like, okay, let's just see where this is going to go. It was unexpected. It was fun. And it's not something I would want to do all the time, by the way, to turn my podcast over to somebody else. Not that they didn't do a great job, but people don't come to Better Podcasting to listen to other people. They really come to Better Podcasting to listen to us. So from that perspective, we wouldn't want to do it. But it was some people from our audience that wanted to give back to our audience. And it was refreshing, and it was fun for us. And I will always remember it. I still keep the URL. I own it, betterpodcasting.com. And I point it directly to that episode for both Jason and Emily.
Yeah, what I also really liked about this was that we had, I believe, had each of them on a prior episode before this. So it was kind of the two of them coming together here. And you're absolutely right. We were sitting there behind the scenes. I have a photo somewhere of me, and I know that I had a couple monitors set up with them on each one. And I'm just sitting there doing nothing while we are recording our 117th episode, doing no work. It was fantastic. And quite honestly, any way that I can create a podcast without actually doing it is a good day for me.
So that was really fun for us, and we really appreciate Jason and Emily for doing that. The second fun, notable moment that I want to bring up is one that actually spanned months.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually set this up, and we set it up so well that we had so many people concerned. The actual episode numbers that it ran over was 84, 85, and 86. So we came up with this idea months earlier before we recorded episode 84, and it was the long haul that we set it up. Stephen was actually a genius in setting it up in the comments that he made leading up to it. Sometimes I wasn't sure if he was just making the comment, and sometimes I wasn't sure if this was set up. We talked about it after every episode prior, and we're like, oh man, this is, I hope this works, because we're really setting this up. We had hard jabs that we threw at each other, which got more frequent the closer we came to episode 84. And during the episode, we had this growing tension with each other. It was all fake. It was all act. It was the best acting I've ever done, actually. And at the end of podcast number 84, I announced that it might be Stephen's final episode. And that was it. And we each personally received emails and private messages from numerous audience members, and they thought it was actually that I was firing Stephen. That was the thing, that I was firing Stephen. And it was exacerbated by the fact that the next episode, Stephen couldn't record. He had something going on. I forget if it was a trip or a vacation or something you had. So we had Emily step in. We had to clue Emily in before we recorded the episode, because she felt like, are you really guys broken up? I'm like, no. It was all fake. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah. So she came in, she guest hosted it. And at the end of that episode, I couldn't let the episode end with it seeming like she was the replacement host for Stephen, which wouldn't, I mean, she's a great host. She knows a lot about podcasting. It wouldn't have been bad, but Better Podcasting is Stephen and I. So at the end, we gave up the ghost. So the people that were listening all the way to the end got it. And we got a couple of messages like, oh, you got us and whatever. I got to say, Stephen, not everybody and not all audiences could have played along, but the Better Podcasting audience, because of the way that we run the show and because of our personalities, the audience that we attracted actually got it and appreciated. I can't say that every audience would appreciate it. So I want to say thank you to our audience then and now for going through that. That gag could have easily backfired. Yeah. We did thank everybody for their concern. And no, we were fervent about it before, and we have made a note to disclaim everything since. We will never be doing that gig again, and there has never been tension between us to lead to one of us firing the other or us quitting the show or anything like that. And we've made a note to say that that is not happening ever since 85. So it's an ongoing thing, unfortunately, because of that. But we won't be doing that. It's a thing that we could do once, and that's it.
One of my favorite parts about that whole thing was that almost all of the feedback that came in about it was two parts. Someone would respond saying, what happened? And then a little bit later, never mind. I got to the end where you said that Stephen wasn't actually fired. It was genius. I really liked, and I'll give you the credit on this. Yeah, sure. We did some setup ahead of time, but you were the one that had to sell it because you were the one that recorded the episode. So you deserve the full credit on that. And, that was a lot of fun. So if you ever are actually feeling mad at me, you should just go back and listen to that episode. I mean, whenever you are actually mad at me, I'm sure you go back and listen to that episode and just wish what could have been.
I think we spent half of episode 86 saying, no, this is not, we're fine. Everything's fine. So it was really a 3-episode span that we did it, and all the setup before episode 84.
Now, for this next one, I got to dig into the archives of Stephen, because it's been a little while since Stephen's really fully embraced this. And are you ready to talk self-hosting?
Yeah, no, but you are, so go ahead.
That's right, because the next fun episode that we're talking about is episode 65, where we talked about self-hosting. This was in a bit of an arc that we did about different hosting things. And I was talking about the idea of self-hosting, and the description we had was, have you ever considered self-hosting your podcast RSS and or media? During this show, Stephen and Stargate Pioneer talk about the controversial topic that is self-hosting your podcast, and then it goes on. But why I wanted to call that part out there is because I really liked episode 65 for a couple reasons. The first is how sort of some of this discussion has held up, but some of it is how it has changed as well. And really for this, I have to say that as far as what has changed is that I think it's really hard now to justify the actual media hosting of self-hosting, because we talked in that episode all about self-hosting your RSS feed and self-hosting the actual media files themselves. And there's a lot of affordable media host options out there where you could still self-host your RSS feed, but trying to justify the actual files being on an independent service, I don't know that that makes a lot of sense. So I think that that's changed a lot, but also the core idea of somebody else hosting your RSS feed is almost more prominent now about some of the problems that could happen with that than it was when we talked about that before, because we have seen a lot of media hosts come and go very quickly since recording this. There's a lot of people that came into the space and left. And we've also seen some that have just been super frequent with outages. And so there's been a lot of reminders over the years that if you are having your RSS feed on somebody else's service, you are subject to their terms. And the other aspect is, if there was a reliable media host that could potentially be purchased down the road, they still get to dictate what happens to all of those feeds and the archives of those feeds and things like that. So there's been a lot of changes in the space, a lot of media hosts that have been bought up. And so far, we haven't seen anybody just royally get screwed by a acquisition, but it could happen if all of a sudden people had a bunch of redirects on and a media host ended up being bought. You could see it where all of a sudden they just like, no, we're not honoring those redirects anymore. But ultimately, the biggest reason I like talking about this is it was really an avenue for me to almost talk about web hosting. And I'm a lifelong web hosting geek. My first web hosting that I ever purchased was written by check because I was too young to have a credit card. So it was a roundabout way for me to talk about web hosting.
And I like during the episode where you actually talk about the benefits of using a podcast media host while you're saying, okay, this is how you self-host. I mean, it is techie, it is geeky. You gotta be a true hobbyist to actually want to do this. And it is still possible today, but there are benefits of using a podcast media host as well. And I'm just glad that during that episode, you were talking about the benefits and the detriments of both. So it's made it a timeless episode, at least to today. You know, it was made in the episode 65. I'm guessing it was late in 2016, and it is mid 2024 now. So you're talking almost 8 years later, and it's still valid. So yeah, way to go.
Hey, I had a question for you, SP.
Yes, sir.
If I was a podcaster and I wanted to podcast on a boat, do you have any advice for me?
As a matter of fact, I do. I have podcasted or recorded from an airplane in flight. I have podcasted from a pontoon boat in the middle of a lake. I have podcasted from the rest area on a roadside. I have podcasted or recorded from a sauna. And let me tell you, some of those were huge mistakes from an audio perspective, but I did it. And I did it to prove the capabilities of some of the equipment and the limitations of some of the equipment. So on July 6th of 2016, I recorded some segments on a pontoon boat on a lake in Wisconsin. I used the Gonna Geek Network banner right beside me in the pontoon boat. I used the BPHS-1 headset. I went into a Zoom 5 and the phone simultaneously, so the audio was from the headset. I recorded the video with my phone. You can see the actual video on Gonna Geek episode 152. We talked about it in Better Podcasting episode 38. We also talked about the airplane and showed the video on the airplane in episode 11 of Better Podcasting. There basically was a lot more do not do this than there was good advice in the clips, right? But it was fun. And that's the essence of hobby podcasting for us, is to make it fun. It was fun to do it while I was on vacation as a little stress reliever during the stress relief. and it was, since then I've optimized my audio preferences, and I don't think I would do that ever again. I would need a more quiet environment, and I have better gear now to limit those audio interruptions, like the Sennheiser MD46 that I use in conventions, right? There's still some ambiance sound, but it's really optimized for the voice at the time. And also, I would highly recommend monitoring your audio recording wherever you're recording. And yeah, you might look like a geek with full headphones on in the middle of a convention floor, but it's better to do that than to lose the audio, because you have that one opportunity to record. And if you miss it and you're recording a guest of a lifetime for your show and it's bad audio, you're going to regret that for a very long time. So I think it's better to do that. And just this fun, plain boat and roadside and sauna podcast. A sauna, by the way, is echoey as all crap, but it was fun. And Stephen, it was fun for you to get the results back. And you're like, okay, SB, what do you do now?
Yeah, I have to say that looking back on these, I think there's a couple interesting things that people could do a little bit differently, or you might look at this a little differently than when you did that. Is number one, I think that the expectations of podcasting has changed so much that you could get away with something like on a boat and your audience accept it more than back then, just because, depending on the level of silence reduction and microphone filtering and things like that you did. Like, if it was reasonable enough, I think audiences are more open to the idea of a less ideal environment than there was back then. But the second part is, I think audiences really do like the gimmick aspect of it. And I think that the gimmick aspect of it, if played right, could work. And what I mean by that is, yeah, we're talking about a plane or a boat, but I'm talking also like a convention space. So if you have a topic or a niche that you go to conventions and things like that, people hearing you actually at a convention in less than optimal conditions, they might just connect a little bit with that actual aspect of it more than the degraded quality draws them away. So I think that the environments of expectations are different now. And so I think someone could actually have a somewhat serious episode from a boat.
A boat?
Maybe a boat,
Like
not a plane, but
about or a boat?
Your decision. Oh,
okay.
You try to decipher what this Canadian said.
How much Molson did you have before the recording of this podcast? Yeah, it was fun. And we'll just leave it at that. We got a lot more to talk about. The next fun, notable moment was episode 50. That is when I went over the golden rules of hobby podcasting. There was actually 15. There is one that is always referred to as the SP golden rule of hobby podcasting. It's actually rule number 3 on this list of 15. And that's no more than 2 podcasts per week. But I was looking at this list and it has not changed. There might be some underlying things behind the rules that we were doing at the time that have changed now, but the rule itself has not changed. The golden rule itself has not changed. I won't go over it, the entire list right now. Please go to episode 50 and listen to it if you want to know. The 2 podcasts per week took me 6 years after I said that to actually obtain it. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit hurtful that I made this rule and it took 6 years to get there, but I was having so much fun with a lot of the podcasts I was doing. And I had a lot of help from teams in order to make it happen that it enabled me to go farther. I do not recommend that now. There is so much promotion and marketing and things outside of the actual podcast that you need to do today that if you do more than 2 as a hobbyist, then you are spreading yourself too thin. You should be doing more for your podcast, and that will limit your time available to do more podcasts.
There is, before we go to the next one, I want to call out a specific number from this, and I'm going to call out episode number or point number 7. You knew exactly which one I was going with. We did not discuss this ahead of time. Audio listener, he held up 7 before I said it. And it is start with and maintain a stable RSS feed. And this is part of his number 7 point, bracket SP. I'll be a Libsyn fanboy until something radically changes. And we'll leave the quote at that because I wanted to call out that, no, I'm not calling you out negatively on that. I'm calling you out that you at the time future-proofed yourself with that statement because at the time it made a lot of sense, but you knew that things could change in the end. And I will say that something has radically changed with Libsyn.
Yeah, you can go back to Better Podcasting Live Chat, episode 70. You can go through the list of why the origin of season 4 of Better Podcasting really started, and it was the list that we did there. There's been more since, and we've gone through them more. I don't want to kick a dead horse when it's down, but yes, the whole reason that we're doing season 4 is because things did change. Things will change in podcasting over time, but the actual rule itself has not changed.
No.
Start with and maintain a stable RSS. And that is still true today.
Well, moving on to our next fun moment, we're going to talk about episodes 172 and episodes 176, because these are a couple of hardware interviews we did. In episode 172, we talked to Craig Reeves from Mackie, and in episode 176, we talked to Dan Hewley from Focusrite. And these were some interviews that we did when we were looking at what's to come in the realm of podcast hardware space. And I think we kind of predicted the future a little bit. We had the sense that there's got to be some stuff coming. We had seen, yes, there were some new products at the time that were coming out, but it was in general more of the same. And so I think this was something that we kind of wanted to explore what everybody had on the radar there. And we didn't get a lot of information, unfortunately, but it was still fun to do some interviews with Mackie and Focusrite on this and just get the hardware perspective. And also, we know that a lot of our audience likes to nerd out like we do about hardware. So these were definitely standout moments that I think about quite a bit when I look back at our past 300 episodes. They were just fun. They were different for us.
This was pre-Tascam Mixcast. This was pre-DLZ Creator. This was pre all of that. And what I remember from those interviews, more so than the gear that we were talking about at the time, was the fact that they went through their process of how they refreshed their gear, how they decided what they wanted to work on, and what the timeline was when they came out with things. It's an annual product cycle that all companies are in. And if you want to learn more about that, listen to the 2 episodes, 172 and 176, and you will hear the same processes and timelines that the company adheres to today that brings us the newer gear, like the Roadcasters and the DLZ creators. And we have made no secret about it. We're looking forward to the next generation of that stuff for podcasters right now. The next one that we want to talk about for a fun, notable moment was actually a special one for Stephen. We talked about it for like months before it actually happened. And this was Stephen's 10-year podcasting anniversary. And we pulled it off by I was interviewing Stephen. It was, I believe, the only time that we've done that. I was actually interviewing you. There were some questions that you didn't know what was coming, and you had stuff that you wanted to say, but I think it pulled off really well. And congratulations for meeting that 10 years of podcasting. That was episode number 146.
And you have also well surpassed 10 years as well, so we should call that out. And what I want to mention about this is this one was really important for me to put on the list here that we're going to discuss because, yeah, 10 years was a big moment for me. I do remember where I was sitting when I kind of actually realized I was coming up towards 10 years and did the math and everything. I still very vividly remember that. And I think that having you interview me was honestly one of the best ways I could mark the occasion. It meant a lot to me that you were willing to do a little interview about this and celebrate it on Better Podcasting. And that was the way that I would, have chosen out of all the ways to celebrate the 10-year milestone. And so I still thank you for doing that to this day because I know that I suck as an interviewee.
Well, you suck at more than that, but
Fair enough. Well, go listen to that suck at episode 146.
The next fun moment was another Stephen specific moment. He did some testing and he wrote an article, and it was actually one of the hard hitting reporting that we did at the time because there was an expectation in the space that something was working one way, and we proved that it was not working that one way. And that was when we were talking about the Google RSS SEO in episode 81. And Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, so this was a 2-parter. This was definitely discussed on the podcast, but also there was a companion article, and they really were sort of reflective of each other because they kind of relied on each other a bit. And what happened was at the time, there was a lot of people who were continuing to give, I would say, just repeated advice about Google not indexing RSS feeds and RSS feeds not impacting Google listings. And the whole topic of this was sort of centered around the idea of if you're hosted on a media host, how does their RSS or how does their SEO affect maybe your SEO or vice versa if Google is indexing that? And a lot of people at the time were saying that there was no impact, that there was nothing happening on the Google side of things for SEO. And we ended up doing some exploring and really coming up with some concrete examples that very clearly showed that Google was indexing and that there was an impact based off of the RSS feed itself and how it affected SEO. And so put together this companion article. And in the end, I actually had to create a video because some people came back and said, well, how about I see your screenshots, but what about this possibility? And it's like, no, that possibility also falls apart. And I just did a follow-up video that showed that. But why I liked this was because in the end, there was actually a couple different names in the industry that saw that and said, yeah, this is true. This is something that can't be refuted anymore. And I think it changed some minds about it and really opened things up. And we were referenced obviously a couple times, which I'm not going to hide. That is enjoyable when you and I try to go out to put an alternative point of view out there. And people actually change their mind a little bit and see things our way. So this is one of those times where there was some examples of that happening. And I felt like it was an accomplishment.
Better podcasting by definition is in contrarian mode for the rest of podcasting just because we're the only ones that talk about non-monetization and hobbyists and having fun 100%. Everybody else, eventually they talk about how you can make money, how you can optimize for monetization, that sort of thing. We're not going to say it's bad, but there are a lot of podcasters out there that just want to do it for fun. And that's what we're here for. So for us, in some cases, to poke back at the industry and say, no, that's not, we understand why you're saying that, but that's not true for hobbyists. And this is why nobody else is doing that. So that's what we're still getting enjoyment today out of Better Podcasting. It's kind of why we're going through the media again. We'll reference it, season 4 of Better Podcasting, talking about media host providers from the hobbyist perspective. So everybody's talking about monetization there. And we're like, okay, but what if you don't want to do that? All right. Another notable fun moment that kind of went against industry norms is the saying that came out at the time that we recorded episode 104, that babies are podcast killers. Well, we gathered the troops. We got some people that had new kids, including Stephen himself, and we kind of proved it wrong.
Yeah, this was a fun one just because at the time there was, like you said, a lot of people who were saying that. And there was honestly way too many people, I think, saying that around different communities. And as hobby podcasters, we're doing podcasting for fun. And any parent knows you have to allow yourself some level of fun for yourself. You have to carve out that time. And so for podcasters, that can be the time that they're carving out for themselves. And so, like you said, we rallied the troops. We had people from Digital Soup Podcast. We had Jay and Kier from, at the time, I believe it was Gallifrey Public Radio. We had Amos and also the aforementioned Emily, who contributed stories about how they navigated podcasting with kids. And then we threw in our own advice as well. And you were at the other end of the spectrum than me. And I thought that was good conversation because we were looking at it from very different points in our parental lives.
Yeah, to put it succinctly, I am now a grandparent, and Stephen, you're still in the mode of trying to get kids out of grade school. So that's what we are in lifespan right now. So yeah, it was really fun to put that together and to put it in. I think you hit the nail on the head. As a parent, you need to have fun. Podcasting is a great way to do that because you could do that while the kid is taking a quick nap. Even if you do it solo, you can do that. Or if you ask your partner, can you watch the kid for half an hour, 45 minutes while I record? Yeah, you can do that. So I think it's a wonderful stress reliever that you could do from the comfort of your own home, basically. And it is not a podcast killer. Now, you have to make some arrangements, but it's not a podcast killer. Now, this next one, Stephen, that's coming up, actually, I think, as I think about it, might be my favorite episode of Better Podcasting. Favorite episode ever out of the 300. And that is when we had our entire community, our entire audience chip in and tell us about a certain topic. And that was what they wish, not what we wish, what they wish they would have known before podcasting. We had at least a dozen, if not more, people that gave us audio feedback or video feedback. There was more that wrote in with their feedback. And it was a truly community event. It was actually referenced quite a bit in the community because it talked from the hobbyist perspective, what they would have done differently. And if you listen to the episode today, not much has changed from that. You still have the expectation that you're not going to make $1 million within 6 months. There's still the expectation that your downloads will not be that huge. There's still the expectation that you might never actually get a lot of downloads, and to concentrate on the funness of it. And there's a ton more advice in there, but it was so, I'm looking through this list and there's some people that aren't with us anymore that are on that list of people that gave us feedback. So that's a very special episode to me. Stephen is the one who put this on our list, but I was thinking of doing it as well. I'm so glad you did.
One of the things that I really liked about this was that I remember thinking about how this was showing that our podcast was an avenue for other hobby podcasters to really help other hobby podcasters. Like we were that ship that they could get on and help people and get off when they needed to. So I think that all of these people coming together really helped highlight that we could be an avenue for them. So I definitely appreciate this. And, Yeah, this would probably be my top one as well.
Every year since we started Better Podcasting at the end of December, we have done, and we've talked about it before many times, but we have done an episode, each of one of us separately, about how our gear and our studio and our podcasting has evolved technologically throughout that year, whether it's a service, software package, actually microphones, hardware, our space that we're talking about. And those are key episodes for us to go back and look at how we progressed over time. It also shows that we didn't get the mega studios that we have right now on day one. Not at all. Stephen, I still remember your tower of leaning hutch that you had everything thrown into, going, oh my gosh, the thing is it's going to fall over. I remember one time asking you, what if an earthquake strikes? And you're like, I guess I'm getting all new gear. So yeah, but those episodes, I can't say just one because they've been every year since 2015. We've done one even in the year that we took a long time of a hiatus. We came back specifically to do a gear episode. We have done one every year since then, all the way to 2023. We're going to do one again this year. I'll just call it out right now at the end of 2024. So those have been fun episodes for us. And for our audience that is techie, they love that. For our audience that's not techie, that just wants some ideas of what they might want in the future, it's good for them too. So they've just been great episodes, and they just come every year, and it's been fun recording them.
Yeah, and we're not going to give you all the episode numbers on that, but go search them up if you really want to. They're just look by date and look for the end of the year.
December of whatever year, yeah.
Yeah. And then we had an honorable mention that we wanted to say before we got into some advice that doesn't hold up that we wanted to call out. And the honorable mentions are, of course, the spin-off podcast to Better Podcasting. There is the Better Podcasting live chat and the Better Podcasting chats with SP. Well, both of those are currently on ice. They are a lot of fun memories recorded in both of those there. And if we were to throw those into this feed, like some other podcasts might do, we would be well over 300 by now.
Yeah, Better Podcasting chats with SP. I mean, I interviewed other people that podcasted from a boat. I interviewed a Hall of Fame podcaster on there, and there weren't interviews, there were conversations. And I really enjoyed those, and I enjoyed our live chats too, because that interacted more with our audience than we normally do on a Better Podcasting main show. They are both on a hiatus indefinitely. I don't know if either one of us coming back, but they were fun to do at the time.
All right, now you want to hear about our failures. We know that. And so let's start off with the first failure that we want to talk about, which is going to just be in general a bunch of platforms that are no longer. We're going to talk about how there was Blab that we said you could use. There was Skype, which was a high quality audio solution, and Hangouts on Air, which is no more. So these things were great at the time, but they all we're not now. And Blab no longer, Hangouts on Air no longer, and Skype has just gone to where a long time ago.
Yeah, and even something that I'm using today, StreamYard, I'm expecting that to go by the way to the dodo. Within a year or two, it was bought out. They fired all the development people. So I really think that StreamYard is going to join this list eventually too, which is a shame because I really enjoy it, but I'm also preparing for the day that it's no longer there. So yeah, that's advice that if we could take any singular episode out, we would, but there wasn't an episode that we talked exclusively about any of these. And the Skype one, I know Skype still exists today, but that audio hiss that they inject is just, for a hobbyist or whatever, you record it, that hiss is there, and it just brings the audio quality down.
When it got so bad, I bought hardware because I wanted to multi-track record on my end, basically meaning that like when we were doing the Gonna Geek show, I had our co-hosts there, so SP and Chris, and we had either JS or John at the time, and we had them coming into me individual tracks through Skype, but because the hiss was layered, I bought Behringer MDX 4600 hardware compressor so I could have 4 independent channels that auto-gated to remove the hiss because 4 layers of hiss was too much. That's how bad it got.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So the next advice that didn't hold up, we've already kind of talked about it already, but it's in a different avenue. In episode number 178, we put together some criteria for choosing a podcast media host provider. And I looked through the criteria. They're still largely representative in the criteria that we have today, but there have been changes. Like when we put it together in 178, which was 2019, when we put it together, IAB stats, we were like, this is the future. We have to go with this. This has to be it. If you don't have a media host provider that does not have IAB stats, you need to get off it. Well, fast forward to 2024, and we're like, yeah, as long as they're comparable to each other, they're okay. There's also additional considerations that we put in there for hobby podcasters, like multiple feeds available, dynamic audio insertion, not ad insertion, audio insertion, multiple contributor or team accounts in there as well. Will our criteria change again in the future? Probably. The tech keeps evolving. In fact, since we started our fourth season of Better Podcasting, the podcast media host providers have almost all on our short list, and some not on our short list, have added additional capabilities, and we've tried to report all of them as we go along. This will likely be something that we come back to in the future, so I can't say the 2024 criteria, that's what it's going to be in the future. But in episode 178, we kind of like put the stake in the ground and said, this is it. And it's not it anymore.
The stake is not there. It has been kicked out or washed away. One of the two. The next thing that we want to talk about is editing talk, specifically early editing talk. And this is a vague topic, but I still want to call it out here because in the early conversations that we had in Better Podcasting about editing, we did talk a lot about the importance of high editing and super high production quality and how that would draw more ears towards you. And yes, there's a degree of that is still remains to date. But an example that I want to call out is how we talked about how things like crutch words should be edited out. We did I think a whole episode around that sort of thing, and slight misspeaks in conversations and things like this. And at the time, that was definitely the trend and what a lot of people were expecting. But if you look at what audiences are expecting today, basically consumer expectations, the expectations have changed. And there are people out there now who are looking for a more natural sounding approach. We're not talking about the group of people drinking beers around a room with a Yeti in the table, because that was sort of the people that we were trying to get away from before. That's still the case. That's still not great. But there are people out there who are looking for the conversation to not sound overly edited. And there are people who actually comment back that they stop listening to podcasts now because it's obviously not a natural flow. I personally speculate that this comes from a change in social media, specifically things like TikTok and YouTube videos. I'm not just talking YouTube shorts, I'm just talking YouTube videos and other content that is in line with what podcasting is, that traditionally doesn't always have a high level of editing involved with it. And I think it's almost become more normalized. So I think that if you look back at the overall hard and fast messaging that we were saying early on, I don't think it holds up today because there is a lot more flex in what consumers are looking. And yes, there are people that will still be driven away by something that has too many errors or too many misspeaks or too many crutch words. But there's also people who will ignore that altogether and not even realize that you said every other sentence. But okay, maybe not that extreme, but it's basically the consumer expectations has changed. Now the basis, I think, still remains. I will say the basis, which is you should still put some care and love and quality into your work, and it might be something that elevates you above a potential competing podcast. But I think that I think basically the advice might be looked at today as over editing.
The last advice that we're going to say in this podcast that didn't hold up used to be a favorite of mine. It was something called Clammr. For those that are new to podcasting, you don't know what Clammr is. That's okay. You don't need to know. This was think of it as an early headliner or clip generator with an audiogram to it. It was very limited. You had to do it on mobile, which at the time the screens were incredibly small at the time. The time frame that you can clip was really small to begin with. I forget if it was like 11 or 14 seconds. It grew as the capability was improved over time or modified over the time. It was very time consuming. Didn't matter if it was at the beginning or end. Very time consuming to create. I think the fastest I got a clip out was 5 minutes. And that was just me going, woo, 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 woo. And because that's all the time that I had before I boarded a flight. And I really wanted to get done before I boarded a flight. And I think I went back listening later and I didn't like clip it correctly. You could kind of hear the blip of a word at the beginning, at the end. And it wasn't exactly the clip that I wanted. It was here's another thing. Because it was a developmental thing, we basically proved over time that they had false interactions injected, false profiles injected, and follows. It was obviously false. The demographic didn't fit the demographic that would follow us and follow our clips. And there was not much mainstream interaction on social media, which is where we put the clips to begin with, which kind of has jaded or biased me over time to not to static audio or audiograms over time on social media. It's like, yeah, I've done this before. It didn't quite work out. I have never heard of it really working out. I've never heard of somebody coming to my podcast because they found some of these clips on social media. So kind of poo-pooed that technology a little bit. So, and I'm not talking about dynamic video. Even with us talking like now, if I would take a clip and put it on social media, it wasn't that. It was a static audio with like a little audio bars that went up and down. Maybe it was before its time because with AI, you can generate it now and it's a lot easier. It definitely could have had significant improvements to it. But here's another thing. Once it was gone, it was gone. There was any link that went back to the Clammrs itself. If you took the link and not the video, they go nowhere now. And like social media posts for years ago, they're blank. They don't go anywhere. The social media posts that you actually downloaded the video and uploaded back up, which was another painstaking, time-consuming process, those are still there. But the ones that link back to Clammr are not still there. And I'm still kind of raw over the fact that at the beginning, we didn't understand that those follows and accounts were fake. And by the end, we're like, oh, that is so fake within Clammr itself. Now, the other way to use it was to get those clips out into social media, which I did. But the Clammr itself was a non-starter to begin with. And anyone that's come up with something similar, it's never really taken off. So yeah, that advice didn't hold up to go all in on Clammr.
Now, before we get to the Better Podback, I do just want to mention that we know there's probably lots of other things that we've said that don't hold up. And we would love it if you would come to our Discord and give us some examples of that. But those were some standout ones that we had thought of that kind of stick with us to date. But we would love you to tell us about that. Come to betterpodcasting.com/Discord or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. And while you're there, tell us some of your favorite moments as well. But I did want to call that out before we started getting people saying, no, you're wrong in this way. We want you to tell us we're wrong. We just want you to know that we were wrong too.
Yeah, we do. I also want to put a special note in there. I was in preparing for this episode, I originally was going to try to speed listen to all of our 299 episodes. I did not get that done. But what I did do is the first like 30 or 40. And as I was going through this, Stephen, I got to commend our past selves. We put together a plan when we started. The very first 6 episodes were like, we are going to do this in a block. We're going to talk about these certain things. And we even planned out our first 30 or so episodes of topics before we started as well. Now, granted, we were in like prep mode for 9 or 10 months prior to recording our first episode. So we had plenty of time to do that. But we did do that. And I really like the fact that we did it because it really shows when you go back and listen to those episodes, we were prepared. Now, were we as verbal as we are today? Maybe not. We were a little bit more refined now than we were, but the topics themselves, the subject matters themselves, and our knowledge that we were trying to impart to everybody, it really comes through. So if you haven't had a chance, Stephen, I'm talking specifically to you right now, to listen to those first 6 episodes, I would go back and listen to those episodes and just go, wow, we've come so far, but those were actually a lot better than we remember.
I will make sure to produce the SP cut where I am removed, and then I can go back and listen.
Yes, AI at its finest.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
All right, let's get to the Better Podback this week, which will stay on brand with our discussion about the past 300 episodes, because in our Discord, SP, he asked the question, any favorite Better Podcasting moments you wish to share? We were asking that to our audience, and we had JB, which is the amazing Jason Bryant. He said, better podcasting, FTW, which for those of you who don't speak Leet speak, it's for the win.
I got to say, Jason, that episode was in the list even before you said it. So thank you for saying that. Yeah, it was great to have you on the show, and you're welcome back anytime. So we might be opening it up to guests in season 5. We haven't talked fully about it, so we'll see how that happens.
We also had Owlerun say,
still waiting for the drying paint spinoff we were promised. And that is so timely, Owlerun, or Jason, as I know you, because there will be a bunch of painting in my house coming soon, including this eventually, which might impact Better Podcasting in the future. The first thing is the fence. Believe it or not, I'm going to go Tom Sawyer. I'm going to be whitewashing the fence here in a couple of days, actually, when it dries out. So yeah, paint drying spinoff. Yeah.
I gotta say, that was a moment that stuck out to me as well, was the way that I managed to fit a paint drying podcast as a random example of a podcast that somebody might have. I did that solidly for many, many episodes.
Yeah, and I believe I own the yourhobbypodcast.com URL. We have not used that nearly as much as the paint drying podcast there. Johnny Pennington spoke up and he said, still enjoy the Christmas special drama from the early years. I gotta say, give me a specific example from that, Johnny. I'm looking forward to that. Also, he came back during the live chat and said, hopefully some Rusto-Mic tales. Remember the Rusto-Mic?
I have to say, I totally forgot about the Rusto-Mic. This was one that I'm glad you threw in there, Johnny, because yeah, the Rusto-Mic, for those of you who don't know this, I talked about how at one point, and this was maybe even before Better Podcasting, I had picked up a random cheapo microphone from a local music store, and it was on sale for, I don't know, some sale. And eventually I gave it a test, and then it just sat around, and then I looked at it and it was rusted. It was rusted on the grill. So it is now dubbed the Rusto-Mic.
So it didn't rust on your propane grill. It rusted on the grill of the microphone itself.
Maybe I do use it on the grill. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it's probably the best thing to use it for as a utensil on the grill. Yeah.
And of course, he just wanted to make sure it had lots of call out. Jason was in our chat today, and he did say, I'm pining for a return of Better Podcasting. So there you go. You got 3 mentions of Better Podcasting.
Well, Jason, if you want to return to Better Podcasting, you better get a hold of your co-host first, and then we'll arrange a time for you to be on. Yeah. We also had Wiko Widow come on and say, "This is Sparta" was yelled during the movie 300. I kept on saying that I don't catch that reference in the Discord, just antagonizing him. And I think it did, because he's like, there better be a time in the podcast where it is yelled out, "We are Sparta." So there you go.
And then we also had Waffles give some interesting comment. He said, I'm starving for content so much I listened to SJ and SP talk about the live action Avatar The Last Airbender film. I assume that he is trying to entice us to come talk on his podcast.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, my topic has been predetermined, and I am so sorry, Waffles. You know what I'm doing right now, and I don't have the time, but I have been immersing myself in that content, and I can't wait to come on your show and talk about it. So with that, though, I want to transition to a serious moment, because those long-term listeners of Better Podcasting, you were forced to wait for this episode. And there are two reasons for that. And I want to go into it right now kind of quickly. And I want to be fully open, transparent, and honest with you because this is from the heart of a hobby podcaster. This is not a professional podcaster. And there was a reason that we had to take the last couple of weeks off. First of all, thank you everyone for understanding our delay in recording episode 300. The day after we recorded episode 299, my daughter's grandmother passed away, and there was just no way that we were going to be able to record the following week or the next week after that. I especially want to thank those that came forward, and there were several of you, and offered their condolences, and those that offered to step in for an episode or two. Honestly, if it was any other episode than 300 or any other quote unquote key episode, we would have gladly taken you up on it. And you have my heartfelt appreciation for stepping forward and offering that, really. And number two, I will also say on a personal note related to that, I was asked to say the eulogy, and due to the many years of my job and what I do at my job, I actually have to give talks and briefings and stuff like that, and hobby podcasting, in particular, Better Podcasting. I was able to pull together something that reflected the person that she was, the many memories friends and families held dear of her. And here's the more important one, in my opinion. I made everyone laugh, not just any little laugh, but great big belly laughs throughout the entire remembrance. It is how she would want to be remembered. It is how she would want her life to be celebrated. And that is exactly what we did. Everyone in attendance came up to me afterwards and thanked me for doing such a great job and saying what a great public speaker I was. And I got to say, without these past 300 episodes of Better Podcasting, I would not have been able to do that as well as I did. So I will credit Better Podcasting and the fun that we've had and the preparation that we've done and just going through this 300 times as being able to pull that off in a very emotionally charged environment, right? So I resolved to be happy, and I took it and I said, show's on, and I did it, and it went great. So I want to thank Better Podcasting and my experience and our audience for enabling that over the past 300 episodes. And I also wanted to thank everybody for their condolences and for the offer to step forward. All three things, such amazing from our audience. Thank you very much.
I was not there, of course, but I want to say something that I'm pretty sure some of our audience would be thinking right now is I think many of us can appreciate how the history of podcasting might have helped you with the public speaking and whatnot and all that. But I think that probably anybody who knows you will agree that give yourself credit, because I'm sure your personality and who you are was the biggest driver of your success with that. Because you know, if I think about someone giving a eulogy and whatnot, I could just picture you, and I think that, you know, you are you, and you should take your credit for that more than podcasting. So that's just what I want to throw out there, if that makes sense, because your personality and who you are is probably a big factor of that.
Yeah, you mean me being a smartass all the time? Actually came true.
I was actually being sincere for once, that I think you should pat yourself on the back for who you are. So
okay, thank you very much. I'll do that later off camera. And with that, we need to talk about the future of Better Pod. Don't worry, it's not bad. We just need to talk about what's happening in the immediate future of Better Podcasting.
For sure. So for those of you who are wondering, what does the recording schedule look like? Well, first, I do want to call out right now, as SP mentioned earlier in this show, we did not intend the media host season to go on this long. It's just some delays came along the way. Some extra names came on our radar that we went, let's just keep going. Let's keep going. And so, did we want to go all the way into late July? No, we didn't, but that's where we're at. And so what the plan overall is, we'll be podcasting this season and wrapping it up, assuming no other delays come, wrapping it up at the end of July, taking August off, and coming back a couple weeks into September with the next season of Better Podcasting, which will not be reviewing a specific thing. That's not what it's going to be. It's going to be more like traditional Better Podcasting, but still with the format change and whatnot. But know that overall that will be the plan. But here's the kicker, is when we look into the summer vacations that we have planned, the summer delays that we have and whatnot, what you can really expect is that we're going to be every other week until that last episode of July, where we will end up recording the last episode of this season. So if you want to get into the details, the way it's currently scheduled is, of course, we're recording this one today. This is episode 300, and then we will not be recording again next week. That is a sort of long weekend for both of us here. It's a holiday weekend for Canada. Today is on July 1st. And then July, I don't know, somewhere in there is Market Day. I think, what is it? The 4th? Is that what it is? No, I know that it's the 4th. So July 4th is Independence Day. So we're not going to record that week. The week after, we'll be back with episode 301. And that will be Acast, and then I will be away, so we'll be a week off on that. And then the week after that, we'll be back with episode 302, and that will be Castos. And then the week after that, which is not a gap week, we should be back with our episode to summarize the season. Now, those are the current slated details. As I said, anything could change, but just know that basically it'll be every other week till the end of July, where it gets a little bit changed, but that's where we will end the season and then take August off.
Looking forward to completing this off and making our final recommendations and making our decision of where we're going to put Better Podcasting as we move it off of Libsyn by the end of summer.
So thanks to everybody who has listened to this episode. Thanks to everybody who has listened to any of our episodes over the past 300 or any of our spin-off shows. We appreciate all of your support. And also, I'm going to just, sorry to a good portion of you audience, I want to call out, I'm not going to say the names, but I'm going to call out the diehards who are still listening and have been around from the early episodes, let's say 20 or less. You're still around. You're crazy. I'm going to say that. You're still listening to me. Like, come on. There's a level of crazy there that I can't call out.
And they're still podcasting.
But no, seriously, thank you for the support, and especially all the diehards. Thank you very much. If you are somebody who has listened for a certain period of time that's recent, let us know. When did you get on board? Because we'd also kind of like to know what drew you into Better Podcasting. And in general, you know, if you have any thoughts about Better Podcasting, let us know, because we will be starting in September, that new season. And like I said, it'll be more in the line of what was before season 4.
We are looking forward to any feedback at any point in time. If you want to give us the 5-star rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts.
No, stick with iTunes. It's look back. Say iTunes.
And yeah, iTunes still exists, by the way. I was still using it the other day. And if you want to throw in a review there, we would greatly appreciate it. If you want to subscribe to the Better Podcasting YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up there. We appreciate that as well. And mostly we just appreciate you conversing back and forth with us. The Discord has been a wonderful resource for a variety of different things. It doesn't matter if it's podcasting. It could be tech related, could be vehicle related. It could be what you're enjoying on TV. That's all in there. If you're having problems with your DAW or your video editor, we have channels aside from that. And people do come in from time to time, and other people come in and answer. It's not just us. It is other people that have been podcasting for years and have experience that really makes that community. And we thank every single one of you for being part of it.
So that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for episode number 300 of Better Podcasting. I'm Stephen, saying we streamed this tonight on Hangouts on air. Wait, no, sorry. But you're listening to it on Google Play Podcasts. Oh, wait, sorry, no. Google Podcasts. Oh, wait, no. I lost track.
Google Play Podcast. All right, see everybody next time. It'll be a regular episode. We're looking forward to hearing your feedback. See everybody later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen Jondrew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.